Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, good night, good morning, good afternoon, good dawn, good dusk. Wherever you are, I hope this word finds you well. And if you are not doing well, I pray a blessing of protection in whatever you're going through and that the Lord sees you through. Have a quick, instant word that just came recently. It has to do with how we go about treating those who have wronged us in the perspective of how we've also wronged others. And it starts with recognition and respect. Now, the Lord does not give us the gift of discernment to respond to the things that we recognize in the manner and response that help me, Holy Spirit. The Lord does not give us discernment to recognize spirits behind people to respond in the same manner that it's being spewed out. The Lord does not give us discernment to recognize spirits behind people, situations, and what's going on in the atmosphere to respond in the same way. The Lord does not give you recognition to realize that you are at a different altitude and level than somebody for you to look down on them and to think that you are better. And sometimes we merge the two. Perhaps you can sense the spirit of pride on somebody. Perhaps you can sense the spirit of envy. Perhaps you can sense the spirit of offense. But then what he calls us to do with that discernment is to respond with respect. Because you understand that it's not the person that you're fighting against, but the spirit behind the person. So the Lord was telling me it's important to recognize, but incumbent to respect. Important to recognize the spirit for discerning purposes, but incumbent upon us to respect for righteous service. So what that essentially means is you recognize the spirit that's operating behind the person, but you also respect the person in front of that spirit. And it doesn't mean that you have to appreciate that which they are doing. It means you don't respond to what they're doing. You don't respond to what they're doing. You do the divine opposite to not feed the spirit that's coming up against you. And he was just telling me at this time it's important for us to recognize our humanity. Now is not the time to be holding bitterness towards people who aren't even the real enemy. And I'm telling you, we can do all sorts of things to people. I myself as well, I have hurt people. I have said mean things towards people. None of us are innocent of that. We have wronged others and have also experienced wrong ourselves. But at the rate which God is moving, he's saying, let it go, drop it. Okay, you understand that this person doesn't like you, but you're responding in the same way that they're treating you. So what are you feeding them? What are you feeding them? What are you feeding them? They're feeding you with poison that they're not even sure of, and you know that it's poison and you're giving it back to them. Someone's feeding you with poison. Someone's feeding you with poison, and they might not even be aware how poisonous, the thing that they are feeding you, and you recognize that it's poison and you're giving that same poison back to them. What could that mean? You know someone is impatient. You know someone's disrespecting you. You know someone isn't treating you the way that you would desire, and you're treating them the same way. So even if your gift of discernment is moving in such a way and manner, the fruit still needs to be there. And the Lord was telling me that hurt that is unaddressed leads to hate, and hurt that is addressed leads to healing. There is such thing as forgiving someone but still being hurt. but the sign of your forgiveness is evident in your response. There was a time where I had a lot of unforgiveness in my heart towards an old friend of mine. And mind you, I was in the wrong many times, but there are some things that they said that just didn't sit well with me. Maybe some things have been said to you that just never sat well with you. And every time I saw them, it wasn't hurt, it was bitterness. Even when they were doing something kind, I could not see them beyond what they did. And the problem with when the balances aren't weighed equally and evenly, where forgiveness is concerned and how we deal with wrongdoing, is that the whole concept of forgiveness and the whole concept responding to spite and hostility has very much to do with the same Savior that responded to us. When we talk about forgiveness, we can't really talk about it in its magnitude without recognizing what Jesus did. And the Lord was telling me there are some people who your forgiveness for that person is not contingent upon them understanding why they hurt you. It's not. And it's okay to be hurt. It is. But your forgiveness is not contingent upon that person understanding why they hurt you. That can be a part of your healing process. But your forgiveness cannot be contingent upon someone understanding why they hurt you, because even if that person understood or understands why they've diminished your worth, or why they have took up so much time in your life, why they played you, why they wasted your time, why they raped you, why they abused you, it does not guarantee that forgiveness is going to be released, because forgiveness has much more to do with our personal decision than someone else's response to that decision. It's forgiving space for us to recognize that we serve a merciful God that has forgiven us as well too. Is there room to be hurting? Yes, there is, but there's a fine line between hurt that leads to healing and hurt that leads to hating. Hurt that's unaddressed turns into bitterness real fast because it's being denied and it's being ignored. And you can tell these telltale signs because it happened for me. Your response just to the very atmosphere of the person. For some reason, they don't even have to say anything and your blood boils. Your blood boils. And even when they do something good, you can't fathom that they would ever be able to do something good because of what was done. Because of what was done. In this hour, the closest people to you and the offenses that you're carrying to the closest people to you will be used as a distraction by the enemy to shift your focus away from the kingdom of heaven that is at hand. The word still remains that the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, and it's not to disregard your emotions. Your forgiveness is not always, it's not contingent upon someone's understanding of how they hurt you. That can be a part of the healing process, but we have to make a fine line between recognition and respect. And not respect in the sense that we're becoming a respecter of persons, because the Lord's not a respecter of persons, and he makes it very clear to not have an admiration for the rich more than the poor and having favoritism, but recognizing the spirit that's operating behind the person, keeping your distance and your discernment, but having enough respect to understand, oh, but you're still a human being. And when I was butt naked, exposed in my sin, the Lord had grace and mercy unto me. So if I'm holding someone to a higher standard than Jesus, then who's actually sitting on the throne? If I'm saying that this person's undeserving of forgiveness because of how much they hurt me, what then do I say to the Father who sent his Son that said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do? Jesus essentially modeled that forgiveness is not contingent upon someone understanding how they hurt you, because he asked for forgiveness on our behalf, not even when we fully understood what we did. And there's still so much more revelation to come in terms of the significance of his cross. But he did not wait for our understanding, because life and death was at hand. And perhaps you've had a rough past. Perhaps you've been abused. Perhaps you've been abandoned. Perhaps many people have bared false witness to you. Hey, perhaps you don't even know you because you can't stand you. But at this time, whether it be yourself, your family, and your close ones, it is a distraction to hold on to bitterness that festers unforgiveness, so much so that we cannot commune with the Father with a relationship that's actually built and founded upon us receiving his forgiveness. In the story of David went out to the field to inquire about Goliath because he heard all the men talking. And his brother's like, so David was a shepherd boy. And his brother's like, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? I know you're prideful, and I know you just wanted attention. What are you doing here asking about Goliath? And all David said is, I just came to ask. And then he moved on. And the Lord was telling me how powerful that situation was, because here David is inquiring with the men about Goliath. Here David's brothers arguing with him, and David understood, I'm not about to argue with you as if you're my enemy when I'm actually asking about the real enemy. There's a Goliath out there. There are lost souls out there. There are people who still need to know the salvation of Christ. There's still people who need to know hope. And I ain't about to argue with you, even though you're coming up against me, even though you're bringing your false accusations, because there's a bigger enemy here. There's a bigger enemy here. So I cannot be arguing with you. I cannot be here hating with myself and going back and forth and bittering and bantering with myself, because as I tire out myself, hating myself, speaking these negative things over myself, I'm exhausting myself that I don't even have any energy to fight the Goliath that is ahead of me. I'm exhausting myself going back and forth, holding my children, holding my partner, holding someone who didn't give me the job, holding that church hurt of people who did not apologize to me because they don't even understand the magnitude of how much they've hurt me, to the point where now when a real spiritual warfare comes, I don't have enough energy to fight the Goliath that the Lord told me was always before me. And I'm not talking about Goliath. I'm talking about the enemy. The enemy does not sleep, and the enemy loves when we shift our focus away from him, because it allows him to conserve his energy to move on to more people that are going to do the same. And the healing process is a real thing. Hurting is a real thing. It is a real thing. There is such thing as someone punching you in the face and you releasing the hatred towards them, but still recognizing my face still stings. From time to time I still do struggle with speaking up, because for most of the time I've been told to be silent. From time to time I still sometimes do feel as if I'm not called for this because of all the people that discourage me. But what you have done is you've released your emotions towards the person. You've released your emotions towards the person for giving purposes to recognize the healing that needs to take place here. I've hurt people, you've hurt people, and if you have not recognized how you've hurt people, you've probably hurt yourself. You've probably hurt God. But in this hour and at this moment, considering the fact that one of the very things that Jesus said is that the love of man is going to grow cold, right now is not the time. Right now is not the time to be diminishing someone's worth because they finally confess to you that they did wrong. Sometimes people come to us and they acknowledge their wrongs, and then we take that same wrong that they did and slap it in their face. And then when they come back again, we're like, well, you did this. Well, you did that. I've done that before. And we're exhausting ourselves. Because the Lord has shown us the different level that someone might be at, but yet still we're flying right back down to that level. And it makes the enemy laugh. He enjoys it, because a house that's not divided cannot stand. So I just encourage you, whatever the Lord is allowing you to recognize it, but don't trash it. Recognize and respect, because the thing is, when you respond to someone in the divine opposite of how they're treating you, for some people may call them to question. worked in fast food before, and sometimes when you're actually patient with people who are upset and cussing you, they wonder why you're not responding back or retaliating. They wonder why. There were moments in the past where I would yell at people when I was mad, and I would cuss every bad word on the block. I say the alphabet for swear words. You're this, you're that, you're this, you're that. And sometimes they wouldn't even respond, and I would get even more upset because I was looking for a response. People gonna be upset sometimes if you feed their response, and they're gonna be upset if you don't give them a response. And because the Lord actually honors the fact that we don't give that response, go with the second one. We can't be out here being the enemy's bait. We can't be out here being the enemy's bait. We can't be out here walking into the very traps that the enemy's setting up for us, because then what's gonna happen? We're gonna just drag people with us. And see, the enemy's strategic. He doesn't waste his time going after people who have taken on his nature to destroy themselves without actually having to call upon him to guide them where to go with their feet leading to destruction. The news, all of these things going on in the world. We can't fight what's a bigger battle with smaller weapons. When we respond to things in the same manner, it's like coming with pencils instead of swords. There was a time when a friend of mine, sometimes I would come at the wrong time and be like, hey, I hope you're good. And they wouldn't respond in the nicest way, and I would get so offended. And then I start to realize, no. A soft answer turneth away wrath. And maybe today for you it's no. Whether it be your flesh, because the flesh is in enmity with the spirit. So sometimes a lot of times we're sharing these words talking about, how the word can help us concerning the way we treat others, but it can also help us in the way concerning how we treat ourselves. There are going to be days where the flesh speaks things to you that are worse than you've ever heard from anybody else. But it's like, no, I'm not about to play with you. I'm not about to argue with the thing that's closest to me with the enemy that's right ahead of me. This is the counterfeit, and that's the real enemy. And sometimes we allow the proximity of someone's voice, of the challenge, of the situation, and of the opposition to trick us into thinking that because it's so near, that the enemy is here and not over there. May this word be a blessing and of encouragement for you to recognize, get an increase of discernment so that you stop responding to someone's spirit of pride with impatience, but to also be of respect to how the person's responding, and to also be of repentance when you are holding someone to something that the Lord has forgiven you for. And may it also be of encouragement that now it's not the time for that. It's not the time for that. And that forgiveness is not contingent upon someone's understanding of how they have hurt you. And hurt that is unaddressed is hate. Hurt that is addressed can open the door to healing, but hurt that's unaddressed can open the door to hatred. And we owe people nothing but love. So I pray this be a blessing unto you, for you to reflect, and let's get our eyes back to where the real challenge is at. Let's get our eyes back to it. Because the enemy is afraid of unity. He is. That's why he uses it against us, to have unity in wickedness rather than unity in righteousness. Take care.